thoughts are with his family and with the community he touched, which was almost everybody in Milwaukee. A leader like that you don't see every day, and greatly saddened by his passing. So with that, we'll move into the MPS items. So I think what I'll do is I'll give you some details from the press release, and then I'll turn it over to Ms. Harris, who will have a few remarks, and then we'll take questions. So here's a quote that should be familiar to you. Government should be transparent, it should be participatory, and it should be collaborative. Those words were spoken in a memo by young President Obama, just entering office in January of 2009. So today I call on the members of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, the MPS School Board, to do one of two things. Be honest with the people or resign. As things stand, there's been no meaningful opportunity for public commentary on the former superintendent's proposed budget for 2025, at least since the news broke about MPS's recent financial troubles. Despite that fact, the board has gone ahead and scheduled a special meeting for Thursday to take action on their budget with zero public commentary, nothing. Thanks, public. We've already heard from you back before you knew this news. We're not anxious to hear from you again. That decision is outrageous and it cannot stand. Government that's not transparent, that doesn't share facts with people, that doesn't take their considered viewpoints into account in its deliberations, that's unresponsive to their wishes and unaccountable to their demands, that sort of government we have one word for: undemocratic. That's not a government, that's an impediment. Therefore, I call on the Board of Directors to change course while they still have time. Re-release Thursday's 5:30 meeting agenda, which will take place at Central Services, 5225 West Fleet, hope to see you there, and add to it an opportunity for the public to speak. Do this, or if you can't persuade your colleagues to do likewise, step down with honor rather than being part of an undemocratic attempt to thwart the will of the electorate that put you and all of us there, and to whom we are all ultimately accountable. If the board refuses to honor this eminently reasonable request immediately, I would encourage the taxpayers of Milwaukee to reach out, as is their right and duty to do, and contact their elected representatives to demand that they meet their request. How, you might ask? Well, here's a phone number you should take to heart: 414-475-8284. That number is the number for the Office of School Governance. It will not take you, unfortunately, directly to any school director. It will give you an office. Directors on board does have direct contact information, which is included in my release, but that's a symptom of a larger problem: unresponsiveness to the electorate, unwillingness to hear from them and extend a hand where there should be one available. If a new agenda with breathing room for substantial public discourse and commentary on the proposed budget is not released by tomorrow, I would encourage the taxpayers to arrange to attend Thursday's 5:30 meeting at the auditorium at Central Services, in person, and peacefully but forcefully demand that their voices be heard. The board answers to the electorate. It's not the other way around. In these uncertain times where the value of democracy is challenged abroad and even here at home, we would do well to embrace it strongly here in Milwaukee and with both arms. Shutting out the people will not shut them up. Show up and show out on Thursday. I will be there with you in solidarity and in service. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Harris of the Black Educators Caucus.
Good morning, you all. I'm Angela Harris from the Black Educators Caucus. I'm the chairwoman of the Black Educators Caucus. Since 2018, the Equity Coalition, consisting of Micah, Arwie, and Beck, have been calling for more transparency and accountability from this board. We will often attend school board meetings where we will raise very important questions that fall upon deaf ears. What you all are witnessing now is what we have been dealing with for the last 5 years as constituents and staff of Milwaukee Public Schools. At the top of the organizational chart, it says that the citizens of Milwaukee are at the very top. So at the very least, we should be able to come to school board meetings and have our concerns not only heard, but addressed by the Milwaukee Board School of Directors. So it is our plea to the Milwaukee Board of School Directors today to please add public testimony to the agenda for the special board meeting on Thursday at 5:30 p.m. at Central Services. We also have their contact information as well as contact information for the Office of Board Governance on our page with a call to action for the community. Please reach out to your board directors today and demand that they add public testimony to that special board meeting agenda, so that we can have an opportunity to have our voices heard and answer questions as it relates to the letter from the Department of Instruction and how these current withdrawals as well as any future withholdings will affect our school budget. Thank you.
And with that, we'll take some questions. Well, there's two possible responses, a charitable one and an uncharitable one. The uncharitable one says, really? There seem to be documents showing that there were, at the very least, rumblings more than that at past board meetings where certain questions weren't asked for follow-up. Some reporters have claimed that. The charitable interpretation is that's true, and then what that means is there's no oversight by the electorate. The administration was not appointed by the electorate, it was appointed by the board. The school board members were elected. If they cannot exercise oversight power on the administration, then they are feckless. They have no power. I know at the council, we every day encounter a slew of issues about which none of us are experts, but we're still held accountable. We're still asked to engage in that oversight capacity. The school board members, to the extent they're incapable of doing that, that shows a real problem with the system.
Are you aware of a months-long investigation by the Milwaukee Police Department into MPS and financial issues?
Not aware, haven't heard anything, wouldn't comment on it because it would be based on no knowledge of the details there.
Other than the bully pulpit, what we're doing here, is there something as an alderman or a coalition of aldermen that you guys can do to provide oversight or provide a change in getting through this for MPS?
There is no direct, so there's separate lines of authority. I tell folks that all of the time when they call in to me and say, oh, I'm mad at MPS about this, that, the other thing. There's an elected school board, and it does not answer to me. It does not answer to my colleagues. It doesn't answer to the mayor, at least in principle. It answers to the electorate. And as we all know, the turnout for school board elections is pathetically low. And you might say, well, shame on that electorate, but as Ms. Harris was describing, if you constantly are trying to bring about change and you're thwarted and dismissed, that leaves a person dejected. It leaves them feeling powerless. Why should I participate in this process if it's rigged, as it were, from the beginning? But although I have a good bully pulpit, I don't have a great one. The great one is held by the fellow upstairs. And no, I don't mean God, I mean our mayor. He gave a press conference on Friday, at which, unfortunately, relatively little was said. And his leadership on this issue is direly needed.
Should he be held accountable for these incidents that have led us to this point?
Well, the superintendent has been held accountable. He's resigned after a long closed session meeting. The leadership financially, as you know, the comptroller, something happened with him, whether he was fired, resigned. That's yet to be laid out clearly publicly. And there are other folks. Obviously, the chief financial officer has a role to play in this. And more generally, central administration, it wasn't the teachers who made this problem. It was a problem in administration. But, as I said earlier, the board exercises oversight, or should. And so they have to be held accountable for these choices. And if the choice is just to say, quick, let's get this out of the way and let's move on with business as usual. I'm not expecting that they'll solve the problem overnight, but they at least need to engage in this discussion about whether there's deep systematic reform needed here and not just a Band-Aid.
Friday, the governor called for an oversight audit, an in-depth audit into MPS. He said he wanted community support. He got the support from the mayor. Does he have the support from you?
Halfway. So, of course I want an audit. Naturally I want an audit. Not just of financials, but of processes. But he gave the call to DPI to conduct that office. There's a Legislative Action Bureau that has trust maybe on both sides of the aisle that wasn't asked for help here. Now, that may be for good reasons I'm unaware of, but if you have concerns that DPI knew about this in advance and didn't tell the elected board, who is the electorate's voice, then you might have some concern there. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just questioning whether it's as far as we need to go.
You prefer the LAB, do you?
I am not in a position to judge one way or another. I think that's something you all should take a real close look at and see whether these audits by the DPI are as searching as we might like. Perhaps they are. Perhaps we have nothing to worry about. Perhaps when it comes out, it will lay everything bare. But if it does not, then we should at least be asking now, is that the right group that's looking at it? Hold on, I'll get back to it. I'm sorry. Well, it depends how they react to this press conference. If they say, thank you, Alderman, but we're not interested. If they have another joke of a press conference like they said they had when they went before reporters and said, we're all about transparency. We are so concerned that we get the word out. Transparency, transparency, transparency. Now I'll take both your questions. I thought that was a joke. If that's the sort of stonewalling they're going to do, then house cleaning certainly is needed. If they're going to take this as a call to action, as a moment to raise consciousness and engage in the process more deeply, then maybe they have a place, and maybe it's different for different board members. But what ultimately matters is not their words, but their actions. It's incredibly discouraging. And here, I'll ask Ms. Harris to weigh in, but it's incredibly discouraging. We have a great city. To live up to our potential, as I've said many times before, we have to change perceptions in the city relating to crime and schools. MPS has a bunch of really good schools, but it is not uniformly without deep, deep problems. And everywhere in this district needs to have a searching eye cast on it and saying, are we doing the best for our taxpayers and our children? We just asked them for an infusion of $252 million. That comes on top of $84 million 4 years ago. That comes on top of $750 million in ESSER funds from the feds. At some point, it looks like money alone is not going to be the solution. If you just put money into a problem without the structural reform, you are not going to get the results you want, and you're going to end up with an angry taxpayer saying, what did I get for this? And angry parents saying, why can't we do better? But with that, I'll turn it to Ms. Harris to answer more deeply.
As a community member, as an MPS parent, as an MPS staff member, I 100% hear and echo the community's concerns around not only this district administration, but the board as well. Like I mentioned earlier, we have gone to board meetings time after time and asked for accountability around ESSER funding, accountability around the previous referendum, and now accountability around this current referendum, and we still have not gotten the accountability or transparency that we asked for, and the members of the Milwaukee community are seeing seeing our community suffer because of the decisions that are being made in Milwaukee Public Schools. We are the largest school district, not just in the city of Milwaukee, but in the state, and we produce a great deal of the community members that end up in our city. And when we see our community failing, it is only a reflection of the failures of our district.
Any other questions? We can take two more and then we gotta go.
Alderman, when we talked last week, we weren't quite sure if MPS knew about the late payments or the late documents before the referendum was voted on. We now know that MPS was meeting weekly with DPI, and so theoretically they both knew about it ahead of time. Your reaction to them not telling either MPS or DPI, not telling the public about it?
Well, that's another question of respect. If the administration knew, they certainly should have told their board. If DPI knew, they're going to say, well, we never tell the board. In fact, it's our policy not to tell the board. And that reminds me when I was younger and I'd go into the movie theater and I'd have bad popcorn or something. And I'd say, hey, can I get some other popcorn? And they'd say, well, sir, we can exchange it, but we can't give your money back. I'm like, why? Now I'm kind of sick. Oh, it's our policy. DPI seems to be saying, and that wasn't a good response, right? If something's a bad idea, making it uniformly, intentionally, your policy, your bad idea, that's not an excuse. So if DPI is saying here, well, as a matter of course, when there's huge financial problems, we don't tell the elected body, and that's our policy, boy, that makes things worse, not better. Last question? Oh, I've exhausted you. I'm so pleased. Yes, ma'am.
If they don't hold a public hearing and you call for them to resign, what would be the logistics of that? Is there usually a special election and the current board serve until that point, or how would that work?
Well, the way things go is like this. So Mr. Stratton asked the question about accountability and whether the city, in the form of the alder people or the mayor, can do anything. There is a method of removal that's in the circuit court's power, but it has to be for cause. Can range from everything from inefficiency to malfeasance. I'm not claiming that malfeasance happened here. However, board members, if they're not removed, can be removed by the public in a recall election. However, if you read the statute, it has to be a year's time that they're in office. You can't elect somebody, then turn around, no matter how justified you might think you are, and say, whoops, you have to be at least a year. So it really is back to what James asked me about. It's the bully pulpit. I'm asking board members to do what I think they know is right here. And if they won't do it, then to take a deep look in the mirror and say, is this a place I want to serve in anymore? Am I capable of doing what I came here for? Because there are good people on that board. Everyone I know on that board who's doing it is doing it in a public service capacity. They're not doing it for money. They don't make any money. And they catch so much grief. But that does not mean that they are to be held blameless in this. That does not mean that the public doesn't have a real point in asking for oversight and accountability. So the short answer to your question is, if they don't step down, then we go in Thursday and we ask them to, very peacefully, but very nicely. So, thank you. Thank you for your attention to this, and have a good day.